Paranormal in Pennsylvania may discuss topics such as suicide, murder, and other potentially upsetting things. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to Paranormal in Pennsylvania,
where we discuss history and haunts.
Today's story takes us to a whole new paranormal being, goblins.
Goblins?
I'm Sarah.
And I'm David.
Let's get into it. Welcome
Goblins.
to Season 3. All right, so we kicked off Season 2 by adding aliens. Now, Season 3, we're introducing goblins.
Goblins.
So, I did not expect that there would be reports of goblins in Pennsylvania, but there are actually two stories that we're going to get into today. The Goblin Scarecrows of Pennsylvania and Easton Goblins.
Okay. And are there, guilds or associations about slaying goblins?
No.
Oh.
Okay.
Sorry, you Goblin Slayer fans.
But we'll cover each separately. So we'll divert a bit from our normal structure of the haunt and then the history, because we're going to just kind of jump into the history and haunts of each. Starting with the Goblin Scarecrows. So these are not specific to one part of Pennsylvania, but instead they move around the state. They will inhabit places such as Allegheny National Forest, Pine Creek Valley, and Elk County, among other areas. They're mostly located in northern PA and the PA Wilds, which we actually covered in our Season 2 opener. So
we did, yeah.
Interesting parallels.
Wait, when you say Goblin Scarecrows, and stop me if I'm stealing your thunder already, what does Goblin Scarecrow look like? What does that even mean?
You'll hear.
Okay.
So it's up for debate if this is just one Goblin Scarecrow or multiple Goblin Scarecrows, but the being is described as looking basically like a demonic scarecrow. The scarecrow has tattered clothing, which I think is fairly normal for a scarecrow, but it's stuffed with thousands of insects instead of straw.
Oh, that's weird. Are they maggots or centipedes or beetles?
I think all of the above.
Oh.
And the scarecrow has a pumpkin head, claws for hands, and teeth that can actually bite.
So this is like nothing like the traditional goblin.
No. But it's called a Goblin Scarecrow.
Interesting.
Yeah. And the most detailed account of this Goblin Scarecrow was actually in a book called Vampire Universe by Jonathan Mayberry. He wrote that the scarecrows are, quote, held together in the shape of a man by sheer demonic force of will, end quote.
Interesting. And so, they think it's like a scarecrow that moves around?
Yeah, and I don't really get the goblin part. Like, I hear what you're saying of it's not a traditional goblin. The next one's definitely more of a traditional goblin.
Yeah, it makes me think more of like the League of Legends character that is a demonic scarecrow that goes around and kills people and takes their souls.
I'm unfamiliar, but it sounds similar. Some people allege that this story is only perpetuated because it's similar to Sleepy Hollow, which was written in New York, so it's not terribly far from where these are happening, especially since they're along the northern Pennsylvania border. And the pumpkin head aspect, as we know, does match the Sleepy Hollow story.
Okay.
The first report that identifies this being as a Goblin Scarecrow is in 1950 in Potter County. There was a group out deer hunting when they saw this being walk through the woods. The being ran at them, howling at them, and so they shot it, but the bullets passed through it. And what fell out of the bullet holes, do you think?
Gold. Jewels.
Bugs. Because remember, there's stuff with bugs.
Insect protein, they say it's going to be the future.
Yeah, so it's alleged that like beetles and other insects were falling out and leaking out of these bullet holes.
Spooky.
Yeah. The reports vary on if this Goblin Scarecrow actually attacks people or not. Some say it just stands there and screams at you. But other reports match that 1950s account that say that it howls and then chases after you. But almost every single account ends with it simply disappearing into the woods.
That is spooky. Like a being made of bugs.
Right.
It's like, oh my goodness. That's like a trope, though. I don't know if this is like the origin of it. I don't know the origin of the trope where there's someone that's made entirely out of insects or beetles in particular.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure either. And a hiker that was in Sullivan County reported seeing this Goblin Scarecrow and stated that it carries a large scythe with it. The hiker reported immediately feeling terrified and that it wanted to get away without the Goblin Scarecrow noticing it. But there are not details on how it actually interacted with the Scarecrow. It just kind of adds to the legend that it also carries a scythe.
So even more so like the League of Legends.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's literally a demonic scarecrow that carries a scythe. I'm totally, its name is slipping my mind.
We'll have to look it up.
Yeah, there's a really creepy trailer that came with his like entire rework. It was really cool.
I wonder if that's inspired by stuff like this, because this is 1950s.
Right. Like I'm seeing a lot of parallels here, so I'm wondering, also now what is even the origin of like the killer scarecrow, Goblin Scarecrow.
Yes. So that's the Goblin Scarecrow. Definitely the less goblin-like.
Goblin.
But now we have Easton Goblin, and this is a completely different story, and I think this is so interesting. So this is a story of a man turning into a goblin.
Oh, okay.
So this is in Easton, PA. It's located on the eastern side of the state, hence the name, Easton, PA. The population there is about 30,000 people, and there actually used to be a mission there, like a religious mission. And this man was a monk at the mission. He was known to be incredibly greedy and not actually a good monk, not in the service of God, but in the service of material goods.
Mm-hmm.
And he would hear confessions from people and then blackmail them to get money in exchange for keeping the secrets that he was told during confession.
Yeah, that's... Ooh.
Yeah.
Big ick.
Yeah. So, he actually encouraged people to sin more because he wanted to get additional blackmail. So imagine you're talking to a monk and you're saying, "Oh, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned, I've whatever, committed adultery." And instead of them saying, say 10 Hail Marys and you'll be absolved of this sin, they say, well, maybe God, whatever, is fine with it, or something to encourage you to continue on with that. This whole time just building a portfolio of blackmail against you.
Oh, so I was thinking about that. When you said he was blackmailing people, my first thought was, well, people would just immediately stop going to confession. People would like walk away from the church, right? And like either go to another town with a different church, something along those lines. But if he builds a portfolio up on you and then pulls it out, then you're absolutely like beholden to him.
Exactly. Right. And these are also very religious people, so I'm sure that there is a religious aspect because he's still a monk.
Yeah, I mean, maybe.
Even though not a good one.
Terrible monk.
Yeah. In what seems to be an unrelated portion of the story, but indeed a portion of the story, the monk beat an old woman to death and was therefore sentenced to hang.
Okay, that makes sense.
Which, the beating the old woman to death seems really out of left field to me, but who knows? I guess he was already so corrupt
Yeah, unless she like found out his secret and was threatening to reveal it, and so she had to be silenced, that kind of thing.
Yeah, maybe? I had not really considered that initially. He was indeed pronounced dead, but upon being cut down from the gallows, his body started morphing. Tusks formed along his nose, his hair grew long, and his nails became claws, and there were sharp teeth that extended from his mouth. The monk then opened his eyes to reveal glowing yellow eyes.
So he was a goblin in disguise.
So, I don't know. That's actually not a bad idea. That's not how I originally interpreted the story. I interpreted it as, he died and came back to life with his true being.
Interesting.
I kind of like yours better.
I think I like mine better too, because it would explain like how materialistic he is.
Right. The locals and the monks alike began praying in hopes that it would banish this goblin back to hell, because they did say that they felt like he was, in cahoots with the devil with how he was so materialistic. And so they thought that this goblin was like a released from hell.
Well, then I think that supports me even more, that it was always a goblin in disguise.
Yeah. But instead of the praying banishing the goblin, he just ran away into the forest.
Well, missed opportunity there to capture him and kill him, but I understand the hope of that.
But he did not just run into the forest and disappear, because allegedly to this day, the goblin returns, and at night he will attack people that either were directly involved in his killing or are part of the lineage that contributed to his killing.
Spooky.
And yeah, I think that's really freaky because it's the whole like sins of the father type thing. And some of the monks that were directly responsible, he allegedly killed them and then ate them, which I think is interesting.
I mean, goblins get hungry too.
He terrorized the monks so much that the mission was actually completely abandoned and they fled Pennsylvania altogether, which I think is interesting because originally upon hearing this story, I thought there is no like monastery or mission in Pennsylvania that I'm familiar with.
Did you try to look up, like, did this indeed exist, like this mission?
According to local legend, yes. I didn't look up, like,
hard,
in
like,
depth.
Yeah, like
No.
historical evidence in that regard.
No, I didn't. So apparently the mission house still exists, but has fallen into ruin and is considered completely haunted. It's haunted both by the ghosts of the monks that were killed by the goblin, and it's still allegedly patrolled by the goblin. So anybody that should enter risks being eaten by the goblin.
Interesting. I wonder if you, like, could barter for your life if you're still a really materialistic being.
Oh, you're like, here, I'll give you a diamond?
Something like that. Some gold, something, like a valuable jewel. If you, like, were confronted by him.
Yeah, but that's not going to get rid of the ghosts of the monks.
No, but I don't foresee the monks being particularly violent or mean. Like, malevolent, perhaps.
That's true. I think that's a good point. So these are two different locations. I would go to the Pennsylvania wilds still. I think the Goblin Scarecrow is a pretty interesting story, and I think I'd be absolutely terrified if I saw it, but I think the odds of me seeing it are pretty small, especially if there's one across the whole state. What about you? Would you go?
I think I would still go. Yeah, with the first one, easily. Because, the Pennsylvania Wild is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
You know, without, like, the spooky things we've covered. So, yeah, and there's all the hiking, there's beauty. Yeah, not gonna not go because of that.
Right. Now, the Mission House in Easton. That one I don't think I would go to.
I think I'd go to it during the day.
Because the goblin only patrols at night.
Sure, that, and I would just bring some, like, valuable jewelry or something with me, so that I could, if the goblin is indeed still there, I could potentially barter for my life. It was such a materialistic creature.
I just imagine us going there and it's like, oh, Sarah, how'd you lose your engagement ring? Well, we had to give it to a goblin in exchange for our lives.
Pretty even trade, I would say.
Yeah, I guess so. So definitely an interesting opener. I'm curious if any listeners have any goblin stories that they know of, either in Pennsylvania or wherever they're from, because I think that these two are so different, which makes them so incredibly interesting.
Yeah, especially since the first one, while being labeled as goblin, I don't know, maybe it's like a historical piece for, like, goblins.
Maybe.
But I think it's, like, really cool that it was actually, like, a demonic scarecrow.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Oogie Boogie from Nightmare Before Christmas.
Oh yeah, Oogie Boogie,
like,
too.
Full of, it's like sewn up with raggedy clothes and filled with crawling insects.
Yeah, Oogie Boogie is a great example. Fiddlesticks, I think that's his name, or Fiddlestick, from League of Legends, is another great example. And I'm sure there's other, like, horror scarecrows.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I think like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark had their own version of this as well.
Oh yeah. Why do I think there's actually a horror movie called Scarecrow as well?
There is.
Okay, well there you go. Boom.
There you go.
Full of ideas.
So those are the goblins of Pennsylvania. Let us know what you think. Would you want to confront either of these beings? And let us know if you have any stories about somewhere close to you having goblins. Thanks for tuning in for this season 3 opener. We cannot wait for this season. And stay spooky.